Palace of Ice, Wild Bill Cox, begun 28th of January, 2026. Introduction. The Shepardis colony was established in midsummer of the common year 1421. 15 ships braved the treacherous ocean along the coast of Karelia, bypassing the spine of the world, threading the five smoking sisters. On board these ships were all the trades represented: hopeful colonists, merchants, guildsmen, and furtive families of the Alk, a religion now banned by the emperor back home in Belinta. 4 months it took for the 2,000 human colonists to create a manor house, radiating roads, each with a town or village at its end. Explorers found a river whose bed glinted with silver and gold. Prospectors delivered on the mineral promise of a new land. Soon, Shepardis was a jewel in the eyes of its people. Colonists grew plump, saw the work of their hands and backs turn to gold. Autumn brought changes the Shepardis colonists had not before experienced. Chill settled in the night air. Leaves changed colors, dropped from the trees. The men who'd vetted this distant place had spoken of these things. Their words had been largely disregarded in the rush for the potential of a fresh start. Then came the catastrophe that changed everything forever. Fishermen reported that giant seals of an unknown type had taken up residence in the rocks north of the last seaside village. Chapter 1. After the first big snow, Jetta's boat was rammed and sank by a shark so big the survivors themselves did not believe their stories. 8 men and boys lost. Not long after, Gimbo's nets were shredded by squid whose suckers were wider than the span of his hand. All the grunion were lost. The colonists drew in their belts, took on a burden of nagging hunger. The team of hunters sent out by the master of the Tinkers Guild failed to return. That was 4 more men lost. Prospectors disappeared. Shepardis did not take it lying down. Every sojourn outside of village walls was afterward escorted by an armed band, including archers and spearmen from the militia. It was by this method that Shepardis understood what was happening to its men. The forests had become rife with giant beasts. White bears big as houses, wolves big as the bears back home. Jim was taken by a night-hunting cat. According to his fellow hunters, that cat dropped from the branches of a rare oak, grabbed him by the neck, and jumped 30 feet straight up with him in its jaws before the rest could react. Monsters in the forest and monsters in the sea. Shepardis lay under siege. It had survived the first month of winter, but in the second, ice came down from the north and blocked all traffic to and from the Empire. Alone, losing men almost every day, the colony watched itself dwindle. Feeling hopeless, the satrap, Volog, opened the gates of the manor to the inhabitants of the outlying villages. Shepardis closed in on itself, shrinking, giving up land. Even so, despite the risks, parties still left the manor in search of lumber for fires, meat for the table, and skins for the fashioning of winter-worthy gear. What changed was the composition of the parties. With adult men at a premium, women and girls made up more of each expedition by number. The Empire did not allow women to perform manly tasks like hunting and soldiery. The colony was forced to adapt by breaking old rules, improvising new ones, becoming criminal. Chapter 2. Shintom woke slowly. The nights were cold beyond endurance. Emerging from the furs was a task greater than any climb or battle. Jemda kicked him through the bedding. "Up and eat!" She was right. If he didn't reach the pot in time, he would be denied the meal. It was the same as always, a few shreds of fish and some bits of gray potato. Bland, but one must eat. There was no bread. "Get your gear on!" Shintom looked sourly at his team leader. May Tinkerson was big and wide, grim and tactless. On the other hand, she was the only spearman in the team to have killed a polar bear by herself. His clothing was well made. One thing there was no shortage of in Shepardis was tailors. From his sealskin boots to the shagreen armbands protecting his parka, Shintom was well defended from the elements. "Wax that bowstring," May reminded him superfluously. Don't want it to snap when we need it. He and May met the other members of the team at the postern brazier. If only I could stay here all day, he dreamed. Soak in all this coal-fired warmth. I could melt here in its embrace. Gil and Alf were already arguing. This would go on all day unless May ordered them to shut up. His spear was the longer, but hers was a pole sword. Overall, Shintom preferred the latter weapon. Both friends were taller and heavier than he. Standing near them, silent, internally directed, was Keen, the scout. Keen wasn't social. He was absolutely focused on being aware. Shintom privately believed that Keen was in secret a follower of the Empty Minds. This was a sect long outlawed back in the Empire. The stories told about them were exaggerated, overblown, farcical. Watching Keen, however, Shintom was no longer so certain. Keen could do stuff. "Hey, we're leaving!" Shintom scurried across the refrozen ice covering the pad outside of the postern. As the smallest member of the team, he had the least trouble with snow and ice. They kept to the old road at first. Once at the village road fork, May led them off to the west, toward the rocky beach on which the Seal Nation had taken residence. That wasn't good. Seals were full of meat and fat, but they were fast, mean, and elusive. There were ways to get around those difficulties. The real danger lay in the screen of large carnivores camped around the nation of seals. If the team was noticed by one of the giant bears or a pack of dire wolves, the whole expedition could go south in an instant. May was the best team leader the colony had produced. Shintom knew he was lucky to be on her team. It came with a high bar of excellence, however. If his bow could not kill, then he'd be back to shoveling muck at the latrines. Keen disappeared into the trees. Since the day was dark, foully overcast, and the trees black against the dirty snow, they were dependent on his skills, his senses, for survival. Shintom kept his mouth inside the rim of his parka. The air there was warmed by his escaping body heat. Breathing was much eased. Keen reappeared just in front of the team. "Bear," he said deadpan. His gesture was tiny, but they all knew now where the danger lay. May made the sign for a semicircle of spears. Shintom stepped into the lee of it, protected by his friends. He hyper-oxygenated, deepening his breathing, shortening its cycle. Keen nodded, turned, and was gone again. The team heard the bear crunching through the ice-rimmed snow before Keen ran into view. The scout ran past, obliquely. The bear didn't notice the semicircle of spears until he was already broadside to Shintom's bow. Crack! Fwok! The 2.5 shaku long war arrow slid into the bear's armpit up to its feathers. Ah! Stricken, shot through the heart, the polar bear dropped his head into the grimy snow, plowing to a stop in a few feet. May and Gil stripped the hide in a few tense minutes. Rolling it, they handed it to Alf to carry. Next, May hacked off the hams, split the chest, carved out the chops and steaks. The others used waxed twine to fasten the bundles to May's broad back. Gil, Keen, and Shintom were the unburdened ones. On them sat the defense of the team. May turned and led them back toward the manor. The bear didn't produce as much meat as a seal would have, but this was the least exhausting hunting trip Shintom had been on. He hoped they wouldn't be sent out again. They were. Chapter 3. Shintom was 15, a small man by colony standards, but his arm was strong, and his skill with a bow sufficient to get him into the premier hunting team. His dark hair and eyes were typical of the Empire's southern Feldani tribes. So was his slight stature. The northerners around him seemed like giants. They were rough, unyielding as the land around them. But he wasn't bullied. They'd all eaten game killed by his bow. May was 28, considered an old woman by standards of the Empire from which they'd come. Her weathered features were permanently wind-burned. She was not pretty by anyone's standard, but she was the hunter team leader, responsible for returning home with meat the most times. By this metric, she was the most desirable woman in the colony. Keen was ageless, timeless, a man made of driftwood. He did not share stories. He did not join in conversations. He simply was. Gil was tall and thin, pale of skin like most northerners. He was friendly and helpful. Shintom liked him. Alf was different. She acted like a man, even smoking when the tobacco allotment was parceled out. Her harsh humor wasn't aggressive, though. It was part of her as much as the never-still eyes. She bathed with us, used the men's sweat lodge, flirted with the girls at the stew pot. No one said boo about it. Alf could give the sword trainer a run for his money. Shintom was not yet sensitive to the tenor of others' thoughts. Sometimes it seemed to him that Gil and Alf were a couple. Other times it seemed impossible to even imagine. They argued incessantly, but it never once came to blows. Shintom did not remember much about his life in the Empire. His mother and father had been slaves there, separated not long after his birth. An unusually compassionate baron watching him shoot with a borrowed bow at an improvised target recognized the potential in the lad. On a lark, he freed Shintom, but had him assigned to the new colony headed for Shepardis. In this manner, he could feel he'd extended a kindness to strangers. With the boy transported, the baron would not have to watch him break beneath the wheel. Now, the young slave had become a citizen of the Empire. As such, he had a stake in the new colony. Should it succeed, he would be respected, far and near. If it failed, the Empire was known for turning failed colonies into prison colonies. If that happened to Shepardis, all was lost. Chapter 4. Hey, we got a job. Shintom rolled out of his furs. Yawning, he fell in behind May. His hopeful attitude darkened when they passed the cooking fire. Aren't we in a hurry? The big woman told him. They followed the alley to the Arkan goldsmith forge. Inside, all was warm and cozy, but the air was acrid and smoky. Shintom had never been to the forge. A freedman, he had no special right to beard the colony's richest man in his lair, but May strode in like a conqueror. Workers, even a clerk, gave way with deference as she moved deeper into the complex. Hey, Daddy! May's here! Shintom's heart skipped a beat. The girl could not have been older than he. In the ruddy glow of the forge and braziers, she was suddenly the most incredible creature in the universe. Thanks, Shell. May bequeathed the small girl a smile that changed her entire demeanor. For an instant, she too was beautiful. He likes you, the girl called, Shell whispered. So do I. Shintom could not tell in that light if May blushed, but she clucked Shell under the chin with a rough hand. As he passed her, the girl gave him an automatic smile. Shintom felt it like a blessing from the ultimate. The man who turned from an anvil, rag around his head, hand on a hammer, was an icon of musculature. Shintom had never met Arkan. He wasn't important enough. For him, at least, this was a rare honor. This is your boy? He asked May without preamble. Yeah, got an eye like Salantalenta. What have you got for us? Salantalenta was the god of the bow for the Alk, a banned religion. In the Empire, her words might have got May executed. Here, surrounded by existential crises, it was less than nothing. Here, come here, boy. Shintom followed the wide man back to the rack near the bank of ovens along the left wall. When they reached the racks at the back, the smith pulled a strange-looking sculpture off its pegs. When the smith handed the object to Shintom, however, the whole of the forge courtyard became a sea of interest. Workers, patrons, family, all turned to watch what happened next. A connection was made between Shintom's mind and hands and his experience. It's a sideways bow? He said, wonderingly. I was told they call it a crossbow, Arkan explained. See the wheels? Yes, I thought it was a sculpture. Sculpture, eh? Interesting. They're pulleys, boy. Pulleys, the archer murmured. As you know, a pulley is a force multiplier, the smith told him. Just like tackle multiplies the lifter's strength, this bow will multiply yours. Shintom was instantly fascinated. You don't draw it like your old one, Arkan continued. Put a foot in that stirrup. Shintom's face lit up. I get it! He pulled the string, discovering in the process it was not gut or twine. The bowstring for this novel bow was made of steel. Steel? How much stronger was this bow? There's a dirty secret to having a superpower, the smith explained. You have to use shorter, stouter arrows in it. Wait, what? The boy stammered. Smiling, Arkin handed him a quiver. 8 fletched heads showed. I had a box made. 48 in all. I paid for them, May told him. You buy the next batch. You're a lucky man if May stands for you, Arkin agreed. Of course, I'll give you a price. Chapter 5. The special arrows were works of art. Examining one, Shintom was overwhelmed. There were no practice arrows. Each of these held a back blade, barbed hunting point at its business end. If Shintom had not been part of the most successful hunting team, he could not have afforded them. The next hunting expedition was at dawn. The new bow was not carried in his hands. It was slung from one shoulder by a sling. In one way, it was much less awkward. In another, it felt so off balance to walk without a bow in hand. Keen slipped them through the cordon of meat-eating dangers. From a vantage on a ledge just inside the tree line, Shintom could clearly see the lair of smaller males, those unlucky in love. It wasn't perfect positioning for a shot against an isolated bull, but it wasn't the worst either. May picked a target, and Shintom hit it with the new crossbow at a range of just under 50 paces. Bang! The new sound was surprising, harsher, more abrupt than of old. The seal simply collapsed. It was dead and none the wiser. The smell of blood would soon draw the interest of the big animals back in the forest. The team had to work quickly. Upon examination, it was found that the sturdier arrow fired by the more powerful bow had passed through the seal completely. Shintom watched, bow ready, while the others butchered the kill. Time was passing. Come on, come on. Only May and Shintom could walk weapons free on the return trip. Twine wrapped bundles of seal meat overloaded Alf and Gil. Even Keen carried a rack of ribs on his back. A snow lion, massive as an empire bear, leaped from the snow-covered brush at the edge of a creek ford. Keen gave a sharp whistle just before it pounced on May. The big woman managed to get the head of her spear in the way. The angle was all wrong, but Shintom had no time to reposition. He guesstimated which way the lion would move to get past May's spear and let fly. The sturdy steel-tip arrow went into the gap in the lion's clavicle, passed through the viscera, and came out its ass. The giant cat, eyes wide, could not believe its bad luck. It struggled to advance, fell onto the dirty snow. They left it where it lay. Chapter 6. Midwinter went by like slime slides down a cold board. Seal meat continued to feed the colony. Some fish were still caught, but the rich hauls obtained in warmer months had reduced to skimpy harvests of bait ball fish. There were plenty of potatoes. The autumn harvest of fruits and vegetables had been generous. No one starved. A very few froze to death. Hunting and firewood and coaling parties were still frequently attacked as they worked. Shintom's new bow became a celebrity. Wealthier parties invested in the new technology, and deaths from animal attacks dropped to half of their initial weekly number. Tallies of predators were kept. Hunters and militia parties were rated for pay dependent on the number of attacks they survived. Shintom maintained the highest number of solo kills all through the second month. On the 65th day of winter, a terrible storm blew down from the northwest. This dumped more than 3 feet of snow on the manor and its largely abandoned villages. Of all the hunting teams, only May's possessed a plan for so much snow. She had skis strapped to the axles of a small cart. This was pulled by Alf and Gil. For the very first time, Shintom was assigned to scout with Keen. "You're both light enough to run on the fucking snow," May explained sourly. "You see something? Take the shot. We'll catch up." It was the most liberating experience the young man could remember. He was thin as a fence rail, and, once the crust formed, could speed across the ice as though it was solid ground. Moreover, Keen was even better at it. Together, they were as quiet as any fox or owl, and far more deadly at range. It was a match made by the gods. Keen pointed out hoof-pawed holes in the shallowest leaves of forest trees. There were deer in the area. In short order, the two dropped 3 unsuspecting deer. Waiting for the rest to catch up, they stood absolutely still, absorbing the odd ambiance of a snow-deadened day. The 3 deer went into the cart. May decided that they could take another deer if possible. These animals were small, slender, their meat better for stew than steaks. 4 would make the expedition worthwhile. This time, Shintom dropped a 6-point buck. The dead male's harem scattered. Faced with a flickering chaos of rumps and flashing legs, the archer held his fire. Those special arrows were expensive. Up 4 deer, May called a return. Retracing her steps, the woman led, followed by Gil and Alf pulling the cart. Shintom skated on the crust along their right flank, and Keen brought up the rear. Shin! The youngest member of the team turned to follow the oldest point. A direwolf. That was bad. There was never only one direwolf. It would be part of a pack. Wolves. May stopped. I got one. Maybe 2. Shit. That was Alf. Big one on this side. Shintom was already in motion. He dropped one in the first second. Drawing and loosing again, he caught one going for Gil. This time, the arrow passed through its belly, but failed to stop its rush. May gestured at the one staying just out of reach of her spear. When it recoiled, she spun to the left and speared the wolf pressing Alf. The wolves dropped back, ran for the trees. Shintom, one retreating wolf in his sight, let it go. He ran to the ones he'd killed, recovered the arrows. Go, go, go! May snapped. The other spearmen grabbed their straps and the cart lurched into motion. All Shintom could think was, I lost an arrow. How could I miss? Chapter 7. 2 days later, a coaling party was savaged by a saber-toothed pride. Escorted by 4 spears and 2 bows, wary and capable, they were still outsmarted. 3 lions demonstrated at the front, while 2 others snuck in to pull 2 coalers off their wagon. It was a shrewd use of resources for the pride. Some said that the lions were scourges sent by the gods of this place. Blue flame powder spirit repellent appeared, became a fad. The attacks continued. At the end of the week, 3 coalers had died. No lions had been killed. May was called in to talk with the satrap. She returned from that meeting grim as old Muktuk. We've been assigned to protect a coaling party through the gap. That's a suicide mission, Gil protested. Ghost lions kill non-believers. That's Alk talk, May countered. They're just lions. We can take them. Empty minds, Keen said. They stared at him, surprised. We don't believe in ghosts or sorcerers, he explained. That was the most words the team had ever heard him speak at one time. He and May now looked at Shintom. What, me? He demanded, embarrassed. You and Keen make a good team. You afraid of ghosts? Hey, I'm not afraid, Gil protested. Just respectful. Shintom thought it over. Was he superstitious? How many times had he prayed to anyone listening to save him from slavery? Thousands. He'd long given up on the gods when Baron Agna had freed him. Who or what was responsible for that? If it can hurt me, he said slowly, I can hurt it. Keen will make sure I shoot first. For the first time since the team had formed, the leather-faced scout smiled. Chapter 8. May was right. Keen and Shintom became a lion-killing team so effective that regular coaling runs resumed. Over 1 week, the pair killed 5 lions. That was the end of it. They were so good that the satrap drafted them into a special unit whose whole purpose was to kill off the bears and wolves surrounding the Seal Nation. These created an existential danger for the firewood parties and seal hunting teams. Shintom only missed with 2 arrows over the course of 100 shots. This was at variance with the colony average, which was 4 arrows fired, 2 lost, and 1 a useful hit. The former slave became a high-value member of society. He had not seen May for 2 weeks when they ran into each other at the cookpot. The big woman held the small man's face in her broad hands. Turning him to and fro, she, You're not getting any sleep, are you? Shintom looked away. It's the job. Gotta save lives. I'm the best man for... Yawning into his friend's face, the young man was close to falling asleep on his feet. Come on. May grabbed his shoulder, led him back to the sleeping furs. You sleep. I will see the satrap about it. But sleep! Yes'm. Chapter 9. Shintom slept 30 hours straight. After a cold shower and a breakfast from the malicious stew pot, he felt better than he could remember. Gemda handed him a bundle of smoked and salted fish. "Remember me when they make you captain," she joked. "Yes, ma'am," he promised. That was doubly enjoyable, as Gemda knew full well the boy never made a promise he did not keep. Something had changed. Rather than being underfoot, seldom noticed, Shintom was suddenly someone the other freemen bowed to. When Captain Alamf of the Miners' Guild nodded in passing, Shintom almost fainted. Keen was at the muster fire near the postern. "May said to tell you to wait for her. Something important, I guess." They stood on the stones near the coffee urn. Shintom loved the smell. Born poor, he didn't think of the bitter beverage as a necessity. For him, it was a luxury fit for a noble born. He'd never even thought of paying the copper per day to have a morning coffee. "Wait." Keen looked up. Nothing. Thinking about money." It was true. Shintom had saved all the bounty money he'd earned with May's hunting party. That added up to 10 gold pieces. The Coaling Guild had paid him 1 gold per lion, 2 silver per wolf. From that, he had managed to save another 3 gold and 8 silver. With 13 gold in his pouch, Shintom was pretty well off. Most militiamen did not even own a single gold piece. Of course, he admitted, they were prodigal drinkers, and booze wasn't cheap. May arrived around noon. By then, Shintom was half certain he was avoiding duty. He should be at the Coaling Guild corral, waiting for assignment. He greeted the big woman. She waved his words away. "You're back with us. Satrap caved when I put pressure on him." "Oh, yeah," she added as he processed it all. "Me and Arkin are getting hitched. You're giving me away." "Huh?" She laughed into his amazement. "I'm not letting a catch like that go. He's bigger than me. Makes me feel a little silly, like a girl again." Shintom tried to imagine what May would have looked like as a teen. No picture came to mind. Plus, he's good and kind. If I don't protect him, the girls at Noggles will make mincemeat of him." Noggles? That was the Manor Laundry Guild. A lot of single women worked there. Oh. May looked down at him. "You're not off the hook either. Arkin has that cute daughter. She's giving him away. In case you forgot, her name's Shell, and she asked about you yesterday. Maybe you should think about marriage too, now that you're a man of means." His friend grinned, losing 10 years of age. "I'd hate to find you broke outside of Cords." Cords was a gambling den. It was also a brothel. Keen laughed. That was a first. Feeling his face turn red, Shintom had nothing to say. Chapter 10. At the end of the 3rd month, the weather broke. Colonists squinted into the by now unfamiliar sunlight. Smiles appeared on faces usually long as an Arctic night. Melting ice and snow soaked everything that sat on the ground. Frozen winter became waterlogged spring. As the ice melted, the nation of leopard seals retreated back to the north. With it followed the sea beasts, the land beasts, the whole panoply of large animal migration. Farmers went out to prepare reclaimed fields. At first, they were escorted. This practice soon gave way to the usual life of a colony against the sea. Soldiers were released from service to become fighters, farm helpers, and civilian laborers. With the big predators gone, small game became plentiful once more. Meat was now in every meal. Good thing it was, for the stores were running out of last year's potatoes and grain. May and Arkin tied the knot. Shintom had never been to a wedding, so everything about it was new. He spent most of the ceremony standing next to the smith's daughter, Shell. She was so appealing that he had trouble focusing on the ceremony. Nothing like Alf or May, Shell was slim, short, energetic, animated. Somehow, he managed to hold it together until the guests cheered and threw rice so it fell like rain. Watching them start to drink, Shintom felt out of place. Treating the crowd as if it was a field of thorn bushes, the young man slid through it, unremarked. Or so he thought. Shell was waiting for him on the way to the entrance. "So, what you think about working here, with Dad?" she began. Shocked, Shintom stood, mouth open. "Think about it. Things are going great. We have to get used to it." "It?" he asked dumbly. "They're talking about reducing the number of hunting parties to 4. Just the noble-led ones. That means no more bounties for us merchants and you freemen." His eyes went wide. "What?" She was nodding. "Now you get it." His mind racing, Shintom tried to understand the implications. "I could probably get a job with one of the noble parties, but they wouldn't be my friends, not the same. What should I do?" "Work for Daddy, of course," she answered. "He's got 5 apprentices, but no successor." "What?" She grabbed his shoulder. "You'd learn how to make your own crossbow and arrows. Imagine not having to pay for them." Shintom was overwhelmed. "I have to think about it." Her smile cooled 30 degrees. "Don't take too long. Jim Butcher wants me to go to the Vernal Festival with him." Shit. Say something, his mind urged. "I'll talk to May. And your father." "See? Great! You're practically family already." Shell squeezed his arm, and it felt good. Chapter 11. In the midst of reconstruction, a ship arrived from the Empire. Shintom was told by a stevedore that Viscount Wanasi is a close friend of the Emperor's. I heard him say he was here to look things over and give his report to the Emperor. Shintom did not let the sudden wash of emotion reach his face. This was the moment of truth? I better go tell May. She was hard to find. Since the hunting teams had been reassigned, she'd gone on to stumping for Arkin's Forge. One of the best spearmen in the colony, her demonstrations impressed, and her endorsement gave Arkin's line of weapons more weight with the top fighters. "I sent her out to find Bolera," the smith told him. "She showed an interest in the pulley crossbow." "Best bow ever," Shintom agreed. "You'd know," was the answer. As Shintom turned to leave, Arkin called out, "Shell knows where to find Bolera. Why don't you go out and find her together? Cover more ground in shorter time." "Here!" A gold coin spun through the air. Shintom snatched it with a smooth motion. "Go eat somewhere while you're at it. I don't feel like cooking tonight." "Shell!" The girl appeared as though conjured. "What is it, Daddy?" One explanation later, the couple set out for the village of Antoina. It was one of the first villages on the North Road reclaimed from the wild, and much was going on in it when they arrived. Chapter 12. "Do you think the envoy will give us a pass?" Shintom looked at his companion. "I don't know. May says there's a possibility that he's just here to rubber stamp us as a transport colony. That'd be bad." "Daddy says the same," she agreed. "But Ella, over at Noggles, told me that there's other stuff going on." "Such as?" They stood on a dry spot, watching the village bustle with new life. A team was scooping sludge out of the central well. A second team was rehanging doors, glazing window holes with parchment, and throwing rotten furniture on a bonfire. Wagons dragged soggy wreckage away to the river. Roofers marched past, chanting to coordinate their carrying of 2x4s and 1x8s. Shinto noticed that half of these were women or girls. So many men had perished in that first awful winter. There weren't enough to go around. "Oh, shit!" Shell turned toward him. "What? You see something?" No. May and Alf always said we were going to become a transport destination because of the women." "Huh?" "Back in the Empire," he explained, "women aren't allowed to belong to the Hunters Guild or join the militia." "Well, yeah," Shell replied. "That's why May could become famous here." The girl added, "She's so cool." "She sure is," Shintom agreed. "But that's a problem. By Empire standards, we're criminals because we let women share the manly tasks. You guys are supposed to stay in the laundry and taverns." "And make babies? Get told who to marry? As if!" Shintom felt Shell's anger. "Thing is, we might end up at war with the Empire." He shook his head. "It's crazy. I can imagine Daddy being told to marry me off to a robber or murderer." Shell's good humor returned. "Daddy would punch his lights out." "Yeah, so would I." "Oh, you would?" Shintom did not need to answer. 2 carpenters walking by greeted her fondly. She beamed back. Just like that, the moment passed. "The girls at Noggles say there was a rebellion back at the capital." "Huh?" Shintom tried to keep up with her shifting thoughts. "I was just talking about it," she said in a matter-of-fact tone. "Missy and Della told me that the leaders of the rebellion are too powerful to just, chop chop." "Huh. So, the envoy is here to officially declare us a transport colony? That way the Emperor can pawn the nobles who led the rebellion off on us. Their mom told them that otherwise there'd be open revolt in the capital." "Wait, we're going to be a transport colony anyway? No matter what we do?" "And the envoy is a rubber stamp," she nodded. "Just like you said." "We better prepare," Shintom decided. "There's safety in numbers," Shell said. "You marry into the family, there'll be 3 strong fighters and a scout. We could apply for a prospector's license or buy a franchise as a caravan guard squad." "Huh, you're a scout?" "Mm-hmm. Daddy and May are talking about it after hours. His apprentices can run the forge. We'll just live like explorers, come back to town to rest up, and off again. Doesn't that sound exciting?" It did. Shell had just asked him to marry her, flat out. I'm in. Chapter 13. Shintom was working on an idea. The crossbow was innovative, advanced, beyond the skill set of most weaponsmiths. As Arkan's heir, Shin had the freedom to work on private projects after working hours. Though the crossbow was wonderfully powerful, it was also unwieldy. Shin wanted a bow he could hold in his hands the old way. Adapting the pulley system to the frame of a conventionally shaped bow made of spring steel proved a difficult task. It must be pulled by a man trained to the task, but even there, it was a formidable test of strength and endurance. Shintom needed to delay the full resistance of the pull until the archer's hands were farther apart. This required a lot of thinking, tinkering, and engineering. Fortunately, the bowstring made of steel wires twisted like twine was part of the answer. Shintom was forced once more to acknowledge Arkan's genius. The result, a month's side work after hours, was weaker than Arkan's crossbow, but considerably stronger than any hunting or war bow pulled by an archer's hand. The young man had been successful. He did not stop there. Realizing that other archers might prefer the hand-drawn type, he began to set up a production line for his new idea. Arkan's forge did not have the room he needed, so Shintom took some of his carefully hoarded money and rented a shop near Arkan's forge. Here, he replicated the smith's furnace and arranged the tables and anvils to his new purpose. In the 6th month, Arkan closed his shop so he and May could try out their new team dynamic. Shintom and Shell went with them, of course. Their first official job as an escort team was supposed to be a milk run. The Empire envoy, Lord Viscount Wanasi, had contracted the Miners' Guild to give him a tour of the gold mines. This was a delicate matter. Pifto Alonsis, the mine's owner and proprietor, was not in the habit of giving potential competitors his secrets. The Viscount's word was temporarily law, however. The gold mine was not close to the manor. It sat on a rocky crag overlooking the village of Getek, some 20 miles away. Prospectors panning the creek there had followed the glint in their pans to a waterfall. The source of this was a hole in the cliff about 20 feet from the top. Enduring a series of dangers and at least 2 lives lost, Pifto found the vein which spawned the creek's largesse. This was a thick streak of gold-rich quartz veined with silver, not to mention small amounts of other metals. To get there, one had to follow the winter-obliterated Freyland Road and then climb on foot up the easiest part of the hill. The first leg would be much easier if the tourist was on horseback. Riding horses were at a premium after the horrible winter. The Viscount got one. His personal attendant, a slim, sharp-featured man, rode a second. The rest proceeded afoot. The going was both difficult and slow. Shintom didn't mind a bit. He was so glad to get back to the business of hunting escorting that he seldom spoke, never frowned. Shell wasn't like Keen at all. She was so agile she sometimes seemed weightless. Her eyes and ears were everywhere at once. But Shin noticed that she occasionally missed certain cues. For one, she lacked the vocabulary to signal with one hand. For another, she did not yet possess the easy rapport he had with Keen. "We go up here, your lordship," their Miners' Guild guide said softly. The path between the ruts was uneven and narrow. May was leading when Shell dropped back to whisper, "I hear animal sounds." When she advanced again, Shin went with her. It was a good choice. With May at the front of the small party and Arkan at the rear, Shell and Shin formed a fire team, she beating and he shooting. As they climbed the steep road, Shintom heard the animal sounds too. Something big waited by the side of the road on the next turn. It was a moose and its calf. Maybe they could scare it off? That was tricky. Moose were both skittish and aggressive by turns. He made the sign to halt. Shell didn't get it right away. Thinking fast, Shin pushed her aside, stood forward to confront the beast. The moose stared at them, unmoving. "Hi, girl," Shin shouted. "Men coming through?" No luck. The moose mother pawed the mud. That was a bad sign. "Go tell May," he hissed at his new wife. "I'd rather not kill her if I can avoid it." Some tiny sound he could not hear spooked the velvet-muzzled mammal. She spun around, looking uphill. As Shin took it all in, a bear came from the uphill turn. Eyes wide, the small man almost ran. The bear was big enough that, if it stood on hind legs, it could look over the roof of Arkan's forge. Why now? Shin wondered, his mind seeking alternatives. If Keen had been point man, this would not have happened. His ears were phenomenal. Shells were good, but as yet untrained. "Run! Tell May!" Faced with destruction, Shintom set Nock to his new bow. This, he understood, was its moment of truth. Chapter 14. 1, 2, then dodge to the left. Shintom hit the bear both times. At this range, missing would be a miracle. But the arrows went where they wilt, and the bear's dense fur hid their locations in effect. Running to the left, Shintom was just missed by a giant paw. It was as big as his chest. Continuing to circle the great beast, he fumbled for another arrow. "Come on! One more arrow!" The bear dropped to all fours and turned to follow the man's circle, but was slowed by mud and sudden surprise. Nock found string, Shin arched his chest to fully draw, slowing to a stop as he did. The bear came around to face him, made to rise up for another swat. Shin's third arrow took it in the right eye, sank into the brain behind it. The bear's attack went awry. Shin backed up too slow. Collapsing, the giant ursine knocked Shin over, fell atop him, crushing his legs. The young archer felt something tear in his right knee. Chapter 15. Shin came aware that something was tugging at the bear's inert corpse. Every motion sent waves of agony through his wounded knee. Grunts of men exerting themselves came through the suffocating pressure of the bear's body. With a final heave, the monster was rolled off of Shin's body, and he could breathe again. "My leg! I might have broke it." Around him stood the envoy, his man Friday, and Shin's 3 friends. Together, they'd shifted the bear's weight enough to roll it away from him. "Can you stand? Can you walk?" Shell demanded to know. Her voice carried traces of strong emotion. Was this what being loved felt like? Shin wasn't sure, but it felt good. I don't think so." Damn, now he was nothing but dead weight. "By the gods!" Viscount Wanasi sounded perturbed. Was he going to order Shin left here in the mud while the party went on to find the mine? "Sir?" his manservant asked. Fark. Let's give him your horse. If we lift him up by the armpits." Strong hands grasped Shim, heaved him upward. Ow! The pain in his legs slowly declined until it could be borne. Someone slapped him on the good side. "There we go. Can't say I'd let a hero with a broken leg walk while I rode." The young man looked down to see the envoy beaming at him. "It's only fair, even if you're a Treek." Shin's mother's tribe was part of the old Treek nation. Being small in stature, dark of skin, black of hair and eye, Treeks were not altogether treated fairly back in the Empire. The rulers were all of the alum, tall, light skin, blonde of hair, and blue of eye. That such a man, a noble of the Empire no less, should call him a hero, aid in his rescue, help lift him onto a horse, it was beyond impossible. "Thank you, great lord," he stammered, overwhelmed. Shell was crying for some reason. Strange that. She never cried. "For that, sir," Shin heard Arkan say, "I willingly acknowledge you as my lord. If the Emperor, may he live forever, sees fit to grace us with a new satrap, I will count myself lucky if you are his choice." Obviously pleased, the man smiled at Shin's father-in-law. "No need. I am merely here as the Empire's eyes and ears. Your archer saved us all, I bet. Could the rest of us have managed that monster without him?" "Should we take the meat and hide?" the man called Fark asked. "And I reduced to slogging through the mud with the rest of you." The Viscount's words belied his actions, for he stepped down and gestured toward the bear. "Well, let's get it done. I want to get to Pifto's gold mine before dark." Chapter 16. Pifto had a barber on hand. Gray of hair and wrinkled of skin, she looked over Shin's knee, clucked contemplatively. "I'll need to splint this," she told them, "which means I'll have to set it. This is going to hurt a lot, Shintom." "Yes'm," Shin began. A moment later, however, he was howling like a Bluebeard monkey. The level of pain was still very high as he sat up, watching her bandage and splint his injury. "It's not broken," she said, "but you strained it to the breaking point." "Bear fell on him," Arkin offered. "He saved our lives." She looked up at him. "He killed the bear? The enormous one?" The smith smiled, folding hands across his chest. "Yep. Bigger than my forge back home. The Viscount's got the hide and meat on his horse." A large man, he spread his hands wide. "Bigger than two of me around." "Young man," the old woman said to Shin, "you have done us a great service. I thank you. Now show me how smart you are by staying off that knee for at least a month." "What?" Though he protested, Shin was well aware that this was great good news. He would not spend the rest of his life a cripple, forced to beg on the street near the manor. "Oh, thank you, ma'am." Chapter 17. After this, their fortune was made. Viscount Wanasi hired Arkin's team to provide him escort during his travels around the colony. He had a budget provided from imperial coffers, one sufficient to the purpose of purchasing a remuda of 12 horses along with a hostler, Sal Brown. Sal was another Treek, like Shintom. They already knew each other and were friendly. The party now numbered 7: the Viscount, Fark, Arkin, May, Shell, Shin, and Sal. Fark and his lord used an odd weapon, a metal-shod javelin with a short chain attached to its butt. Shin had the pulley bow. Shell usually carried a short utility sword. May and Arkin were excellent spearmen. Over the course of summer, Shintom learned to act correctly around horses. Youngsters, they were skittish sometimes, and only Sal seemed to be able to calm them. The important thing, Shin learned, was to let the horses know you were about. Never surprise a horse, neither by accident or with purpose. Arkin's team escorted the Viscount on a tour of the 50 villages. First, they traveled along the coast, watched the fishing families as they tried to restore an all-but destroyed industry. The party came across a prodigal occurrence. A gigantic whale had died, washed half ashore. It had been discovered by sharks and men at almost the same moment, so a tug-of-war was going on between land and sea. Examining Arkin's expression with a keen eye, the envoy, saying, "That whale is Empire property. I expect every man will do his duty to rescue it from those waterborne bandits." It was a hard fight, but worth the result. Shin soon learned the difference between fried, boiled, and muktuk blubber. Even better, the fisherfolk brewed a powerful malt beverage. He and Shell got pleasantly drunk. They sat together on the rise over the tidal wall, watching as night fires came into existence all along the beach. It was the best night of Shin's life. Chapter 18. At the beginning of the 9th month, Viscount Wanasi boarded a packet for the mainland. With him went the salt-preserved hide of the monster bear, intended as a gift for the Emperor. Who knew but that it might put a shine on Shepardis enough to stay the great man's hand in declaring it a transport colony affair? By this time, every archer in the colony had a crossbow or one of Shintom's pulley bows. Food supplies swelled, and surplus was assessed. The satrap passed a law prohibiting hunting of game within 20 miles of the manor. Forced to go farther afield, hunting parties went for the expedient of mercenary escort. Shell got pregnant and took a working vacation going over the forge accounts. Keen was looking for a new team. Shin talked him into joining Arkin's without difficulty. Now they were a real escort team. 2 of the best spearmen anywhere, Shin's novel bow, Keen's short sword, and incredible senses. The team got work as much as it wanted. Soon, theirs was the #1 escort team in Shepardis. Just before the second winter came, the satrap declared Shepardis free of disaster, ready to meet any and all challenges due to the resilience of its people. The inhabitants but took a weekend off, drinking, partying, making music, and love. Chapter 19. It rained for a week straight. Then an early frost instilled new urgency in the population. Scouts from the fisherfolk reported great seals hauling out on the rock-strewn beaches just past the northernmost village. The colony's second winter had begun. This time, at least, Shepardis was prepared for what might come. Harvests, especially of barley and potatoes, were rich and provided much-needed fill for the clay-lined silo holes. Plenty of salted fish, salt pork, ox meat, and bully were carefully stacked in the recently discovered ice caves under the village of Suwong. That village became the center of food dispersal to the rest of the colony. Its population swelled, new construction began. The satrap gave a speech to those living near the Shepardis Central Manor. In it, he laid out a plan for the resisting of those elements which had caused to most harm in the first winter. Boardwalks were to be laid over all important routes as soon as the first heavy snow appeared. Warming huts were built at the midway points between villages, mines, and ranches. Each village was protected by a hastily erected palisade fort. In it, 3 archers from the militia were housed and fed. The militia was expanded, its ranks helped by fresh influx of immigrants. The balance of male and female inhabitants began to even out. Snow fell, not in one great lump like last winter, however. This time, a couple inches fell, followed by a second, heavier fall a few days after. As carpenters began to lay the proposed boardwalks, starting from the capital, a third, much heavier accumulation of snow dropped from an iron-gray sky. Work went on. Warming huts were built, palisades gained barracks and storage buildings. Ox cart sledges smoothed and packed the recently fallen snow so the boardwalks laid atop the smooth drifts were stable. As the pack ice drifted south, Shepardis settled in for a long winter. Just before the waters became unnavigable, however, a last ship of colonists pulled into the bay. Residents took this as a notable event, turning out in large numbers to watch the ship unload its cargo of seeds, spices, fabrics, and horses. The secret cargo, the one nobody expected, was hidden in a few of the newcomers' lungs, the rancid plague. In short order, this terrible scourge struck the older colonists, reducing their number by a third. Then, infants began to succumb to its phlegmy embrace. Residents became shut-ins. Visitors were turned away with suspicion and fear. The ill were collected in cobbled-together hospitals, given food and water and firewood, but otherwise left to their own devices. Children were isolated from the working adults. Gradually, oh so slowly, the colony stabilized, recuperated, resisted the tide of death. This year, when the moose moved south into Shepardis lands, hunting teams were sent out to hunt the giant bears who preyed on the antlered ruminants. The number of invasive predators dropped. Soon, every palisade had a small stack of large hides on hand. These were salted and buried in the snow. Come spring, they'd be loaded on that ship from the Empire, so that, for the first time, Shepardis would turn a profit. So it was hoped, and so it would be. Except for Chapter 20. The newcomers had brought valuable skills with them. A second weaponsmithery opened in the manor. A jewelry shop was next. Arkin was sublime over it. I've always had enough work. There's plenty of demand to go around. Shintom visited the new shops. Though the jewelry was impressive in size and complexity, its workmanship was only equal to that produced by Arkin's apprentices. As for weapons, the new smith produced spears and swords, not bows. As he was fairly well off, the young man purchased samples from both shops. Leaving, he was confronted by a stranger. Dressed in the many-layer woolen winter gear of the Northern Empire districts, the man was endowed with nose and finger rings and wore several neck chains of gold. Additionally, This stranger had both a truculent attitude and a sword in an elaborate scabbard. You there! Shintom, distracted by thoughts, automatically altered his path to avoid the man. Don't ignore me, Treek! A strong hand grasped his shoulder, sought to spin him around. The angle was wrong. Shin stood his ground. Please let go of my coat, sir, he said carefully. I am in a hurry. The man fairly burst into flaming anger. How dare you! Shintom heard a sword being drawn. I am going to die? He asked his tribe's hearth gods. He turned like a warrior, drawing his hanger. The scene had changed. The stranger dropped his sword. Wondering why, Shintom slowly became aware that a third man had come into melee range. It was Keen. Don't make me kill you, he said calmly to the other man. Shin saw the sword he held, recognized belatedly that its point was touching the stranger's back directly over his left kidney. You don't know who you're fucking with, the newcomer grated, making no move to recover his weapon. If you have to tell us who you are, the scout pointed out, you must not be much. His sword did not waver. Bad move, friend, someone said from behind Shin. It was Sal, the hostler. Shin here is a hero. He saved the Imperial envoy. Maybe you should rethink your anger. Get the fuck away from the boss, someone shouted from inside the shop Shin had just left. Two men emerged, both armed with spears. Keen didn't flinch. Sal was clucking his tongue against the roof of his mouth. He, too, had drawn his short sword. Two enemy spears against Shin and his friends' short swords. It was bad odds. Small swords against spears. The scene froze for a long moment. A third stranger came from the jewelry shop next door. His pole sword looked well made and appropriately deadly. Sorry, Shell, Shin was thinking. I won't be home tonight. Chapter 21. Hey, Rube! Townspeople gathered around the confrontation. Many produced weapons. A constable appeared from the sudden crowd. Shin, what's going on? As the young archer opened his mouth to speak, the stranger interrupted him. Are you going to take the word of a Treek against a Frolic? He demanded, outraged. I'll have your badge. Shin is a Fremen, the constable told him. He's an honorable man and twice a citizen of the Empire and here in Shepardis. Is there some issue with him that requires violence? Noble of the third rank, did he attempt to rob you, perhaps? He failed to acknowledge me, was the uncertain answer. A Treek should know his place. Shin? This true? I don't know, Alaris. Not sure why the man is so mad at me. I was going about my own business. I didn't even notice him until he laid a hand on me. I saw the whole thing, an old woman chimed in. Goldie there just grabbed Shin for no reason at all. He's an idiot. Mutters from the crowd agreed with this assessment. Goldie? How dare! The self-proclaimed Frolic sputtered, outraged. I get it now. All right, people. Nothing to see here. The show's over. The constable's voice lost its acrid edge. All right, Lord Keckle. I'll take the time to warn the both of you. Fighting in the street is against colony law. If I see anyone with a weapon out after this, I'll run him in, and he can explain himself to the satrap. He's Tenaldi, a noble of the Imperial bloodline. Chapter 22. Good for you, Shin, May was beaming. You could have gotten yourself killed, Shell complained. They were sitting at the table enjoying a late dinner. Arkin had not said anything. As he and May removed the dishes, the older man finally spoke. Shepardis needs another weapon shop, he pointed out. And I don't want to be part of a trade war with a noble of the third rank. May slapped his shoulder. It wasn't a hard blow. They smiled at each other. But if push comes to shove, I can call in favors. I hope it doesn't come to that. May was nodding as she sat back down. Shin, don't go into the town unless you have to. And Keen? The scout looked up, surprised. Shadow this idiot, will you please? Your combat wisdom will keep us out of trouble. We're friends. I got nothing else to do. Good. Chapter 23. May got pregnant. Shin was dumbstruck. Hey! his friend protested. "I'm not even 30 yet." The team dynamic changed once again. With May and Shell staying at the shop, Keen had a conversation with Alf and Gil. They agreed to leave the militia and go to work for Arkin. For Shin, it was like old times. Arkin replaced May, but otherwise, it was his favorite team back again. Arkin applied for one of the new hunting party franchises. His reputation was such that the request was approved immediately. Shin was so excited he could hardly contain himself. This was a dream come true. They exercised the team so that their reactions became second nature. Arkin was no May, but he was as good as anyone else. 3 spears, a scout, and Shin's bow. It was the ideal arrangement. One big difference, though. This time, Shin watched Keen carefully, picking up his mannerisms, his tactics, his lifelong habits of stealth and stalking. He was learning secrets of scouting, secrets he hoped to share with his wife when next they spoke. "Look." Shin followed Keen's finger. In the distance, birds circled a common spot. Eagles. Something alive, or something recently dead? Shin reported the sighting to Arkin. "Let's go take a look, shall we?" was his reaction. An hour of careful navigation brought them to a vantage from which they could view the cause of the orbiting birds. Oh my goodness. So big. A pride of saber-toothed cats was busily engaged in consuming the viscera from a dead animal of stupendous size. It was so big that the cats had burrowed a cave into the animal's belly. From this, they emerged and entered like patrons at a tavern. Each of the cats seemed, to Shin's eyes at least, to be of the largest possible size, which made the beast they ate enormous, Arkin whispered. "It doesn't seem possible. Wouldn't it crush itself under its own weight?" "I know it." The party members looked at Keen. "Ganesha, biggest land animal of them all, smart and dangerous. Got a tentacle growing out of its head." He spat to one side. "Strong enough to throw a boom egg 30 feet. Heavy enough to crush an ox." "Ganesha?" Gil repeated. "I heard of them. Sacred to the Alk. Not my sect, though. Alk, shamans say it's their sacred guide." "If there's one," Alf mused, "there'll be more." A horrendous shriek came from the trees past the blood-spattered snow. Into view marched a line of animals so tall their heads brushed snow from the middle branches of the spruces from which they'd come. Cats snarled at the fresh arrivals. They slunk off with obvious reluctance. The last saber-tooth came late to the show. Emerging from the bowels of the fallen monster, it looked for its fellows. All it saw were prodigal giants. These surrounded the cat, trapping it against the corpse of the dead beast. Teeth bared in a pointless display, it was soon trampled into red ruin. "What do you do with something like that?" Arkin asked himself softly. "Avoid it," Keen advised. Yeah, Gil liked that idea. Arkin's team circled wide around the Ganeshas. The members were quiet as possible. No one spoke. The big smith pointed to the left. This course brought the hunters free of the forest. The downside was the increased thickness of the snow. Even so, Shintom was glad for the open space. Here, his eye and bow were the masters. Keen appeared at the far end of the snow-clogged field. Shin read his gestures. Mule deer. Careful. Shin turned back to caution his friends into stillness. Then he advanced over the snow, soft as a ghost. For this sort of work, his low weight and tiger paw boots were optimal. A tiny rise led to a fallen tree. Keen was behind it. Shintom moved to his side, crouched into the makeshift blind. Wow. 8 big females. The buck leading them was a beauty. "All we need is one," Shin told himself. More would weigh the team down to the point they would not be able to defend themselves properly. He put knock to string and began the 2-stage pull. Harsh, then easy. Release. Immediately following the flat slap of the bowstring, a doe dropped to its knees, then toppled to the snow. The other does exploded into motion. The buck stood, angry, frustrated for a long second, then bolted for the nearest trees. Shintom let it go. He had the meat they came for. Now to field strip the kill. Chapter 24. Arkin led his team out 5 more times in as many days. Using the sledge to pull loads, the hunters brought in 2 medium boars, a second big mule deer doe, and a mountain goat who'd strayed far in search of greenery. The 6th day was spent marching home. The 7th was consumed by sleep, a hot bath, a sauna, and, at last, some much-needed catching up. As they prepared for a second week of hunting missions, May came to Arkin with a fresh commission in hand. "This came while you louts were passed out, delivered by the seneschal, no less." "What?" May's husband took the parchment, examined it with the intensity of a man who learned to read as an adult. "May, did you read this?" "Of course." "And?" Though he was sharp-minded, Arkin trusted May's judgment more than his own. "I'd hate to lose you," she told him, adding, "any of you. But the prize is what everyone wants. It means enfranchisement." He was nodding. "Which will protect us from that idiot in the capital." "Not much he can do against you if you're the same rank." Arkin frowned. It wasn't typical for the man. He was always so upbeat. "What is it, Daddy?" Shell asked, trying to peek over his shoulder and, as always, failing. "The satrap wants a Ganesha." "What?" exclaimed 5 mouths at once. Reading from the parchment, Arkin shared the mission with his friends. That, should you and your most excellent team bring us the hide and tusks of a Ganesian bull, you and those members assisting will be granted the 3rd rank of nobility. Shintom's mind began to do weird things. The sounds around him softened to a blur. A voice spoke loudly from the depths of his thoughts. "You will be a noble. You will be able to better protect your loved ones. You will erase the ignominy of your slave background." "Shin? Shin? Are you all right?" He returned to reality. "I'm fine. Just had to think a lot. Not used to it." Nobody laughed. Instead, they waited for his next words. "Let's do it." Chapter 25. Shin and Arkin went to work. Fashioning a more powerful pulley bow became the main purpose of life. Once this extraordinary achievement was advanced enough to be given to the apprentices for finishing, the 2 men began to design and craft new arrows for it. Should they produce arrows with frangible warheads full of poison, venom, thunderdust? And what about paint or glue? To blind a monster is to reduce the danger it poses to the team. Or was it better to make the arrowheads solid, cast from the densest metal possible? After much discussion, Arkin and Shintom came up with 3 specialist types of projectile for the new superpower bow. First was the heart punch arrow. Its point was a slim spike of steel 8 inches long. Weighing more than a pound, it should penetrate deep into a Ganesian chest or armpit. Second was the blinding arrow. This type held at its end a small reservoir of rubber tree sap mixed with Ghost Reaper pepper powder. A strike in the forehead would spray this unwholesome compound all over the Ganesha's face, hopefully affecting its eyes. A sticky, corrosive mess, it should both blind and enrage the beast. The third arrow type was the paint bomb. This held more syrupy fluid than the blinding arrows, though its basic purpose was similar. As they crafted these weapons, Keen, watching them, advanced an idea. Why not make blinding and paint bombs we can throw by hand? Which led to more hard work. Gil, visiting during the break, added his 2 cents to the idea bag. "The heretics have a story." "They always have a story," Arkin joked. Yeah, but this one might help." "Don't keep us in suspense, Gil. Out with it," May demanded. "Remember I told you they're sacred to the Alk? Not mine, the other ones." "Sure." Their race hero, Spago Scarface, captured the king of the Ganesham single-handed. The others looked at Gil, amazed. "Does the legend say how he did it?" Arkin asked seriously. "With a leather rope." Question marks appeared over all the other heads. "Wait." That was Keen. "They did as he bade them." "I got it!" "You got what?" Gil asked. "You got leather strips?" the scout asked his host. "And some weights with a ring attached?" The 2 men went into the bins, throwing stuff around. The rest waited in respectful silence. "Here, like this, but I don't know how to—" "I got it! Keen, you're a genius!" Shintom came over to get a better look. Keen and Arkin had fashioned a strange device indeed. A central ring held it all together. From the ring, 3 strips of thick leather radiated out. At the end of each strip was a lead weight. "How heavy—" the young man began. "Let's go try it out," Arkin said. In the exercise yard, the Tam watched Arkin and Keen teach themselves the science of the new weapon. At last, close to sundown, Keen got it right. The 3 balls whipped around the target pelt, tangling it so they had to treat loosening it as a puzzle. If that was a Ganesha's legs, Arkin was grinning at the heavens. A light went on in Shintom's mind. Oh, it's supposed to tangle them up? Now you get it. Arkin made stabbing motions with his capable hands. It'll fall over. We can spear it. Gil, Arkin, and May were all expert spearmen. Shintom was at least as good with his bow. Could this crazy plan possibly work? The beast was 3 times the mass of a giant bear. Couldn't we get away with just skinning the dead one? He asked tentatively. The rest considered his words. Then everyone spoke at once. We'll head there first, Arkin agreed. But scavengers have probably already torn it apart. Chapter 26. Shin had miscalculated. May was pregnant and would stay home and run the business. So Arkin co-opted Alf. 3 spears again. Shell came to him the night before they left. If you don't come back, she said, pausing for better dramatic impact, I'll start dating Jimmy Butcher. Can you leave it like that? He stared, open-mouthed. She was, as she left the room. The team was very different this time around. Arkin had spent a lot of money to provide 2 ox carts, 3 sledges, their drivers, and a hunter-skinner named Jack. He was supposed to be the best in the world. Shintom was quite interested to see the man carried a bow just like his lighter one back home. Alf, Gil, Arkin, Keen, Shin. That was the team. Jack was not there to fight, though he would defend himself at need. A slight warming had been followed by a quick, deep freeze. This left the rutted road slippery as soft, wet clay. On one hand, it made it easier to tow the 3 sledges. On the other, the footing had been rendered so treacherous that their speed of travel dropped to a mile per hour. They camped that evening well short of the scene of their first encounter with the Ganeshas. For dinner, a stew pot was hung over the campfire. Into this went muktuk, cubes of venison, a chunk of bacon, 9 quartered potatoes, and 2 diced onions. One hearty meal later, happy humans wrapped themselves in furs and fell asleep facing the fire. The 2 oxen and 4 horses turned broadside to the heat. Shin's watch was the one ending at dawn. Through a seasoned campaigner's eyes, the sunrise was both heartening and informative. No halo around the sun? It would not snow. A mostly clear sky? It would be cold. The ice would be hard as stone and much less slippery. As long as they stayed cozy and did not break the several rules of wilderness survival, Shin expected this expedition to go much like the others before. Their current Ganesian prey was more impressive, sure, but they'd already killed giant bears and raging bull moose, ravaging boars, and ghost lions. Anything with a body could be killed. Keen had taught him that, though he did not realize it. Shintom's bow was the most powerful weapon that was ready to the human hand and eye. Though the arrow did not carry the same energy, his bow was in essence the same as the big rope-tension arbalests used to defend the harbor from pirates. If anything could stop a monster, Shin thought, it was his improved pulley bow. It took 3 days to cover the same ground that had only taken 1 day the last time. In this time, the team recovered their wild animal awareness and instinctual reflexes. Warned by Keen, the party avoided a wolf pack, a pride of saber-toothed cats, and a very soft-footed snow leopard. When Keen went up to the vantage from which he'd be able to view the corpse of the dead Ganesha, the rest waited anxiously. It would be so very easy if that body had not been ravaged. The slim gray man made the "join me" hand sign. The 4 snuck up to the lip of the rise, hunkered down in the undulating ice. Bones. A section of spine and several ribs protruded from the jumble. Scraps of hide lay all around, half sunk into the solid layer of refrozen ice. Damn! Arkin spoke for them all. Keen? The scout nodded and walked down to look for tracks or spoor. He made no sound. It was eerie, like watching a ghost head off to the afterlife. 6 minutes crept by on little cat feet. Shintom amused himself by blowing smoke rings into the air. Humidity was low. The exhalations did not persist. His snow-clogged mustache made more noise than the humans around him. Keen was calling them forward. The 4 experienced hunters padded softly to the crime scene. When they arrived, the scout turned his back and headed into the trees. In this manner, the party tracked the pod of Ganeshas through the trace, hiding layers of ice. As dark fell and the campfire lit, a distant bellow was heard. "What the hell is that?" Gil demanded, upset. "Ganesha." Keen seemed certain. "We'll catch up tomorrow." "How do you know?" Alf inquired. "Sounds miles away." The scout tapped his nose. "River up ahead. They'll stop for a drink. Cats and wolves will come. Still be there when we get there." Jack and his team of handlers were left at the last camp. Arkin's team would advance into the forest. Chapter 27. A terrible dynamic had come to the shore of a solid, frozen river. From the evidence of his eyes, Shintom constructed a narrative. Driven against the river by a unique confluence of great bears, the pod of Ganeshas had attempted to make a crossing. In so doing, the leader had broken through and was currently freezing to death in the hip-deep water near shore. The rest, smaller than their boss, dithered about, trying to decide what to do next. If one turned toward the river, a bear would feint in its direction, bringing the tentacled monster back around. Big as a Ganeshan was, a giant bear could still probably bite through its Achilles tendon. What would they do? Shin was trying to solve this problem and, as yet, came up with 0. Arkin gestured for the team to withdraw behind the lip of the rise. "We kill the bears," he whispered, "one by one, starting with the one on the left hand, if we can. We'll regroup here afterward." Seeing Shin's forehead wrinkle, the bigger man explained his reasoning. "We leave those bears alone, and they'll ruin whatever they can reach. But if we take the bears out, the Ganeshans might give up on the trapped one and move on. We can throw steel cables around it, haul it back to shore." "I count 7 bears." Keen knew his stuff. "What do you think, Shin?" That was a first. The oldest member of the team asking the youngest one for his take on the problems to solve. "You and me can do it," he decided after a few moments of contemplation. "We come in from downriver, sneak close, and I'll take him with an armpit shot. Then, we either sneak up on the next one or run like hell." "Can't outrun a—" "Oh, I get it." Suddenly Keen was nodding. "We run onto the ice. It's thick enough for us. Not thick enough for the bears, I bet." Shin felt good about himself for this idea. Arkin was viewing the picture in his mind's eye. "Ah, I see. Good idea. But if you get those 2, then backtrack to us. We'll start in from the right side next." "I get it." That was Gil and Alf together. "Man, Ark, you're smart," Gil added. "Ha, May's the smart one," their leader demurred. "I'm just her errand boy." Chapter 28. The bears were so focused on their meat mountains that Keen and Shin were able to get very close. The young man drew his bead with practiced eye and perfect hand. The arrow, propelled by a force equal to about 200 pounds of pull, disappeared into the giant bear's orange fur. Shin knocked a second arrow, but waited to see the effect of the first. "Nothing? But I am sure I—" The bear turned away from its intended prey and began to bite at the snow and ice along his left flank. "He's trying to reach the arrow," Shin told himself. "He's already dead." When the bear stopped arching, slumped to the snow, Shin smiled. "Next?" The second bear made a lot of noise when Shin's first arrow sank deep into the gap just behind its armpit. It stood, wailed, growled, looking around wildly. From its high vantage, it saw the pair of hunters crouched behind a ridge in the ice. Keen slapped Shin's back. "Go!" Shintom did not respond. Instead, he deliberately drew a second arrow, set nock to string, and drew. "Ah, damn," Keen complained, but pulled his sword free with one hand and produced a paint bomb in the other. "You will die," Shin growled, not realizing he was speaking aloud. "Now!" The second arrow snapped out like a mongoose strike, too fast for the eye to follow. Keen hurled his paint bomb. Shin grabbed for a third arrow and, with a half second to spare, loosed it into the bear's raging face. By accident, both projectiles were paint bombs. Blinded, the bear plowed to a halt, struck around at all sides with claws as long as a human hand. Shin jumped right. Keen leaped to the left. The bear stood between the sprawling men, trying to find its targets through a haze of stinging, cloying white paint. Shin stopped thinking for himself then. As if in slow motion, he watched his hand go over his back, pull an arrow, nock it, and pull. The angle was all wrong. The lever arms of his limbs were all in the wrong place. Release was like popping a bubble. Immediately, Shin returned to the real world, rolling, scrabbling, pulling himself backward. The huge predator, the biggest in the whole world so far as Shin knew, arched over backward and fell hard to the ice. Getting back to his feet was the same as climbing a tall mountain. Shin felt sapped, drained of life. A hand grabbed his parka. Keen, the more resilient of the two, dragged him back toward his friends. Chapter 29. Cheer up, son. Only 5 more to go. Shin looked at his team leader, his features blank. 5. Uh-huh. We'll get the 2 on the right next. Arkin made a gesture like cutting twine with the scissors. That reduces the odds to 3 against 5. He means 3 bears against 5 Ganeshans, Shin realized slowly. You think? Arkin was nodding vigorously. Yes, once their number gets knocked down a bit more, the bears will give up. Or, I hope they will. I'm very tired, the young man protested weakly. Our success depends on you, Arkin told him. If you need a rest, well then, you rest. Be aware that this standoff won't last. Other animals will be drawn to the smell of blood. He was right. Okay, let's go. Shin did not feel like it yet, but he understood how important it was for all of his friends. The right-hand bears were downhill from the next blind. Shin was more careful than he'd been before. Downhill shooting was tricky, even for experts. Thwack! This bear, stricken, didn't know what to do. It just spun around, looking for its attacker. When it paused, Shin hit it with a second arrow. Shot through the throat, the bear bled like crazy, thrashing, trying to howl. The young man went for another arrow, and all that were left were the trick arrows. He would need to go back to Jack and his ox cart of supplies, or go back and find the arrows he'd used to kill the first pair. Before I go, however, he thought, I want to get as much done as I can. The 2 arrows in his quiver were rubber/pepper types. Keen. Ignore that one. I'm going to put my last 2 into the next one. The older man made as if to protest, thought twice, and relented. Okay. Lost in private agony, the stricken bear ignored them. This gave Shin an opportunity to hit his 4th bear with both trick arrows. The paint arrows splattered everywhere, giving the bear a clownish look. The rubber/pepper arrow could not have been better timed or aimed. It hit the 4th bear straight in the middle of its forehead as it turned to see why its companion was struggling. Blinded by the bitter, stinging mixture, the huge ursine rubbed its face into the ice, trying to scrape the stuff away. Let's go. Chapter 30. The walk back to the ox carts was long and tiring. After reaming, the team headed back to the river, arriving scant minutes before sundown. The 3rd bear had died while they were gone. The 4th seemed disinterested in anything but its current chemical misery. Shin got very close to his 5th target. There was no other clear vantage or blind worth the attempt. This bear absorbed 3 arrows before it fell, nerveless, to the unyielding ice. The other 2 bears, bereft of allies, were then scattered to the forest by a charge of Ganeshan adults. There the situation stabilized. 4 dead bears, 1 blinded one, and the rest gone. The prodigious Ganeshans could not save their freezing fellow, but, loyal to a fault, they staked out the spot for the night, into the next morning. At last, driven by the need to eat, they left their frozen friend locked in a rapidly refreezing Polinia. Keen went back to bring Jack up to the spot with his sledges and ox carts. This took most of the day, so they were forced to make camp, build a bigger fire, and wait out the darkness. No scavengers found them that night, which was just as well. The spearmen, unused in the killing of so many great beasts, were eager to fight. Morning brought return to sanity. Pulling the Ganeshan free took all their strength and the combined might of the horses and oxen. Once the monster was ashore, the real work began. Freed of his unique role, Shin was given leave to rest and recover from the ordeal. He enjoyed the stew, wrapped himself in furs, and passed out like a man hit in the head by a meteor. Shintom awoke as the butchered meat and peeled hide were being secured to the sledges. Alone of the team, he was allowed to ride back on an ox cart buckboard beside the driver. For the young man, this was a luxury unasked but much appreciated. The Ganetians' tusks and hides were on one sledge, most of the meat was on the other. The ox cart which had carried their food and other kit was turned over to storing and carrying 3 of the bear hides as well. The caravan creaked off toward the capital at the pace of a drunken man singing to the moon. A journey that had taken 3 days on the outward leg required 5 on the homeward leg. This was uneventful and relaxing for Shintom. He needed the rest. His bow arm was sprained. Its elbow ached every time he moved it, and the back of his draw hand burned like fire. Being a very private person, he said nothing of it. Keen and Arkin noticed, of course, but they too made no remark. Upon arrival, Arkin gave the hides over to Jack and a small group of forge apprentices for scraping and salting. Most of the meat he took to the village ice cavern. Once the hides were clean and refolded, they were loaded on the buckboards, and Arkin and May rode off with them toward the capital. That night at dinner, Alf and Gil told the tale of the hunt to an interested audience. Shell, eyes wide, held onto Shin's good shoulder like it was the gate of heaven. When Keen spoke, it was an occasion rare enough to halt the alcohol-augmented retelling. Shin's braver than me. When that bear charged us, I wanted to run. He stayed. Killed it, too. "Don't you ever do something that stupid again," Shell told her husband, tears in her eyes. Once more, he was stymied by the strength of the love his friends bore him. Okay. Chapter 31. May and Arkin were gone 4 days. Just after they showed up, Shell went into labor. Standing outside the midwifery, Shintom absently listened to Arkin's report. "Everyone gets 50 gold each," the man said, "and we are all now officially nobles of the 3rd rank." This penetrated Shin's concern for his wife's rite of passage. "Wait, that means—" Arkin smiled down at his friend and son-in-law. "It means to rank with that asshole swordsmith back in the capital. If he bothers you again, you are legally allowed to challenge him to a duel. I plan to make certain he understands that. I doubt he's ready to go up against the hero of Shepardis." "Wait, what?" "Volog had a visitor when I reported in. Seems that lord is talking with Lord Wanasi. Dunno how he managed to get here through all that ice." "Wait, the Lord Wanasi?" "I don't know of another one. When I gave Mew report, Wanasi was all like, 'Well, that clinches it. I shall return to the Empire with your generous gifts, and advise the Emperor to favor Shepardis as a working, profitable satrapy.'" "I hope he has the authority to do all that," Alf complained without anger. "Big words don't always give rise to big deeds." "I'm not supposed to tell you this," the big smith hissed, leaning in toward the middle of the table. "But Wanasi is the 3rd prince. You know, the one the Emperor trusts." "That's wonderful news," Shintom exulted, momentarily pulled from the real business of life. "It gets better. He recommended you for the 2nd rank. Volog called you the hero of Shepardis. Because of you, my boy, we'll stay autonomous. No transport of criminals. No haven for the revolutionaries." He hugged his son-in-law impulsively. "We've won!" Just then, from inside, came the sound of a baby crying through its first breaths of life. This concludes Shepardis's. Original works of William B. Cox. All rights reserved.